Let's cross live to political analyst Eric Kraus now. Many thanks for joining us on the programme this evening. It's been an extraordinary few hours for people in Russia. What do you make of the timing of the attempted armed rebellion?
It's fairly catastrophic, considering that the Ukrainian offensive had been failing. And finally, even the Western press was obliged to acknowledge that Ukraine was not going to be victorious over Russia. Now everything is back in play. Nobody that I know had predicted what we saw today. It seemed quite impossible. But it is treasonous. Mr. Prigozhin, who had been fighting heroically on the Russian side, and now appears to be doing everything he can to assist the Ukrainians.
It is absolutely extraordinary, and nobody could have predicted what we've seen happening in the last few hours. Now, with the escalation between the Wagner Group and the army intensifying, we still haven't seen any tension or witnessed any tension among Russian elites and the army. Does that send a signal to the rebels, do you think?
I don't. It's a little difficult to understand why Prigozhin chose this time. You're talking about the psychology of one individual. It's a bit like Mr. Kurtz in Apocalypse Now or Heart of Darkness. He's gone rogue. He believes that it's he against some sort of corrupt machine, and he has it's gone to his head. He's probably been under too much strain for too long, and the timing is very unfortunate. What is striking is that you've got an armored column moving. They have no air cover. They have no air force. Russia could blast it to the Russian Air Force could blast this armored column to scrap metal. But it would, of course, be a loss of Russian lives and Russian machinery. So it's a very delicate situation. We're talking about civil war.
And we still haven't heard any reaction from NATO and its allies to the crisis, to the unfolding crisis, I should say. When they do respond, what do you expect them to say?
They must be having a very difficult evening of it. I suspect there are some fervent prayers for Mr. Putin being uttered in Washington and Brussels today, because imagine in an alternative universe that Prigozhin actually seized power, you'd have the world's largest nuclear arsenal in the hands of a very much a loose cannon, if not a madman. So I think they must be very worried.
Despite repeated rhetoric from Western press from the very start of the conflict with Ukraine calling for Putin's overthrow, couldn't that potentially lead to a global crisis, given that Moscow possesses, like you said, these nuclear arms?
We are playing with fire here. If we survive these years, it's going to be more luck than skill. Unfortunately, there is this notion in the West that, if only Mr. Putin left, everything would be fine, everyone would be happy, and Russia would just become a nice, docile colony of the West. Well, this obviously would not happen. Were Mr. Putin to be replaced, he would be replaced by somebody who would be far, far less amenable to Western interests. Putin is a moderate. And he always has been a moderate, and he attempted to create peaceful, beneficial relationship with the West, but he expected for Russia to be treated as an equal. And this is simply not a notion which works with Washington. Nobody is their equal in their minds.
We're speaking to Eric Kraus, political analyst. Many thanks for your time. Really appreciate your thoughts on this. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Good luck. We're going to need it.
Now to our earlier guest, political analyst Eric Kraus. Many thanks for coming back on the programme, Mr. Kraus. As we know, things are moving hot and fast, but with this latest development, hopefully this will bring back some calm back to the city. However, it's interesting, though, isn't it? Because I'd like to know why the Wagner's chief agreed to a proposal from the Belarusian president and didn't negotiate with the Russian leadership itself.
I'd like to know why any of this happened. I would like to understand what was going on in his mind. Did he think he could conquer Russia with a column of 20,000 battle-hardened soldiers, but no air force? I am simply very grateful, deeply grateful to Mr. Lukashenko for having found a face-saving agreement which will allow the troops to return to the barracks and hopefully get back to focusing on the real task at hand, which is to defeat the fascist regime in Kiev.
It would have been interesting indeed to be a fly on the wall during those negotiations to see exactly what was said. Do you think that this was all down to Lukashenko by himself, or do you think there were other political figures involved in the mediation efforts?
As it was said previously, I think it's the political figures in Washington and Brussels must have been praying for Putin today, because they're always going on about how they want regime change in Russia. But they don't seem to think about, if Mr. Putin were to be removed, God forbid, who would take his place? Yeah. It would not be the likes of some sort of liberal opposition beloved to Washington. It would be hardliners of the sort of Mr. Prigozhin, whom I don't think they would want to have his finger on Russia's nuclear button.
I mean, given how extraordinary and unpredictable the turn of events have been over the past 24 hours, let's say, it seems like a very calm and rational way for it all to be over. Do you think this is the end, or do you think that there's more to it?
Maybe there is a God in heaven. I'm beginning to become a believer. An hour ago, I was extremely pessimistic. I was very worried. I was afraid to see firefights between the Chechen forces and Wagner. And I was afraid to see the Ukrainian forces take advantage of the discomfiture of Russia to attack. Now it seems Deus ex machina. There may be a peaceful solution. I don't care so much that the guilty are punished as that we can sort of forget this episode and refocus on what is important. So I have no idea what actually drove this. I mean, it's too new, and I think we'll be puzzling over it for some months to come.
And what do you think is going to happen now? Do you think the Wagner chief and his troops are just going to return back to where they come from? I mean, are they going to be punished by the Russian authorities? What's the future for Prigozhin after this?
I would imagine what I would hope for is he was very heroic, and the Battle of Bakhmut was a great victory for Russia. And I would like to see him retire to his villa in Crimea and enjoy his grandchildren and do some gardening, for God's sakes. I don't think he can remain at the head of a private army. I mean, private armies are very dangerous things. If you look at the history of medieval Italy, if you look at the 30 Years' War, private armies tend to get out of hand and become political players in their own right, and that cannot be allowed by any modern state.
During Wagner's entrance, shall we say, into Rostov, civilians were seen just calmly walking through areas in their presence. How do you explain that?
There were street sweepers cleaning up between the armored cars. I've never seen anything like it. The Russians are admirable in their sang-froid, their ability to keep calm under circumstances which would panic almost anybody else. So it did seem to have a slight holiday flavor about it, and there was an element of theater in all of this. No shots were fired. Apparently a helicopter was shot down, perhaps by accident, we'll know soon. But it was generally a rather peaceful, it was apparently intended to make a point rather than to attempt to seize the levers of power, which they were no place close to.
Prigozhin, as we know, has been very active on his social media, constantly posting voice notes and videos. Do you think we can expect to hear from him later this evening or anytime soon?
I guess we'd have to ask his press service. He's a loose cannon. The guy is out of control, and he's very emotional. And his statements in reply to Mr. Putin's speech, very hard but severe but well aimed speech this morning. Prigozhin's reply was very destructive and seemed to bring into question the legitimacy of Russia's special military operation in the Ukraine, and make all sorts of wild accusations with nothing to back them up.
Many thanks for joining us once again on the programme. It's great to get your take on things. We've been speaking to Eric Kraus, once again, political analyst. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.